When he says it, he means it, and you don't get to bend it and twist it to what you want.
To reach the lost Israelites, the message has to go to everybody, and then the whomsoever will come. The ones who he draws will come.
By the way, knowledge meaning what? Having a relationship with the truth. Oh, you learned, and you got tons of information, but have you come into a relationship with truth? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Okay, so I understand that you're learning the phrase Boker Tov, which is good morning. But actually, the social response is I say Boker Tov and you say Boker Or. Okay? Okay, Boker Or. Okay? Boker Tov! Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, it's spelled. Ooh, that was not good. Yeah, that shouldn't be plugged in anyway. Did my daughter leave that plugged in since the other day? The battery's probably dead. Okay. We probably need a new battery on that one anyway. Okay. I love when people ask me, how's that spelled? Let's see, Ayin Vav Resh. Or Aleph Vav Resh. I'm not sure which the... David, where's David? How do you spell or? Okay? Okay, so you would want to spell it O-H-R probably is the way I would do it transliteration-wise. Okay, it means light. Okay? Okay? All right, so let's see. Today, we're still reading the book of Matthew. All right. And we're going to begin today's readings in chapter 14. We're going to read 14 through 20. I'm not sure we're going to get all the way through 20. Let me see what I wrote down here. We're not going to get completely. We're going to be about halfway through chapter 20. Okay, so a reminder that this is our time to really dig into the Word. I think everybody's doing it appropriately. I think that we're really getting excited about, studying and reading. I'm going to need a bunch of readers up here. Let's see, today we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 readers. So let's get those seats filled up. Okay, we'll get 5 at a time up here. And so we'll have to fill that up about 2.5 times. That'll be great. Again, a reminder for all the rest of you that you should be taking notes of things that you either want to comment on or you want to ask a question about. So during the Midrashic time, the time when we discuss what we're reading, you can go through that process. That'll be great. Okay? Just a quick reminder on the schedule that this afternoon we have the Shofar Clinic and then we have dance instruction, both in this room. Okay? All right, I'm not sure yet if we're going to do the stream on the Shofar Clinic. We might, but we won't be doing it for sure on the dance instruction because we are going to have to start getting this room broken down, fairly quickly on Wednesday. We'll be doing the same thing. We'll have it up to challenge and dance, but we'll see if we can stream, and we'll see what we're going to do. Okay, everybody ready? Yeah. It's like funny how the people who show up in the morning, they start to drift in later. It gets smaller and smaller as you guys stay up later and later socializing. The staying power. Come on. I stayed up later than almost all of you, and I got up for breakfast. Okay? So if I can do it, you can do it. All right? Trust me. I was at breakfast by 8:15, and I went to bed around 2. Anybody beat that? Okay, maybe one of you. Okay, so the rest of you understand? Okay, chapter 14, and we got Steve Waffles going to start us off. For those of you that wonder about us praying before we start, we pray after we finish. How's that? But we are going to pray for each individual when they come up, and we're going to ask a blessing upon them. If you have not read, I would encourage you to come up and read at some point. We've got 2 more days after today of readings, and it is an honor, a blessing, to be able to stand before your brothers and read His Word. Okay. Mr. Steve, come on up. Okay, here we go. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may He bless Steve, who's come up down to Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Steve's going to start us off in chapter 14 and read verses 1 through 18.
Okay. At that time, Herodes, the district heard the report about Yeshua and said to his servants, "This is the Yohanan, the immerser. He has risen from the dead, and that is why these mighty powers are at work with him." And Herodes had arrested Yohanan, bound him, and put him in prison because of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife of Yohanan, had said to him, "It is not right for you to have her." And wishing to kill him, he feared the crowd because they had held him as a prophet. But Herodias' birthday was being held. The daughter of Herodias danced before them and pleased Herodias. So he promised with an oath to give her whatever she asked. And she, being urged by her mother, said, "Give me here the head of Yohanan the immerser on a dish." And the sovereign was sad because of the oath and the guests he had commanded it to be given, and sent and beheaded Yohanan in prison. And his head was brought on a dish, given to the girl, and she brought it to her mother. And his taught ones came and took the body away and buried it, and went and reported to Yeshua. Now when Yeshua heard it, he withdrew from the boat and to the deserted place by himself. And when the crowd heard it, they followed him on foot from the cities. And when Yeshua came out, he saw a large crowd and was moved with compassion for them, and he healed the sick. And when evening came, his taught ones came to him, saying, "This is the deserted place, and the hour is already late. Dismiss the crowd so that they might go into the villages and buy food for themselves." But Yeshua said to them, They do not need to go away. Do not go away. Give them to eat yourselves. And they said to him, "We have here only 5 loaves and 2 fishes." But he said, "Bring them here to me."
Amen. Amen. All right. Next up, we have Manny. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Manny who's come up down to Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Manny's going to take us now from verse 19 to the end of chapter 14.
And commanding the crowds to sit down on the grass, and taking 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to the heaven, he blessed and broke and gave the loaves to the taught ones. And the taught ones gave it to the crowds, and all ate and were satisfied. And they picked up the pieces left over, 12 baskets filled. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides the women and children. And immediately Yeshua made his taught ones enter into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And having dismissed the crowds, he went up to the mountain by himself to pray. And when evening had come, he was alone there. But the boat was now in the middle of the sea, agitated by the waves, for the wind was against it. And in the 4th watch of the night, Yeshua went to them walking on the sea. And when the taught ones saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, "It is a phantom." And from the fear they cried. But immediately Yeshua spoke to them, saying, "Take courage, it is I. Do not be afraid." And Kepha answered him and said, "Master, if it is you, command me to you on the water." And he said, "Come." And when Kepha had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Yeshua. But when he saw that the wind was strong, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, Master, save me. And immediately Yeshua stretched out his hand and took a hold of him and said to him, O you of little belief, why did you doubt? And when they came into the boat, the wind ceased. And those in the boat came and did bow to him, saying, Truly you are the Son of Elohim. And having passed over, they came to the land of Gennesaret. And when the men of that place recognized him, they sent out into all the surrounding country and brought to him all who were sick, and begged him to let them only touch the tzitzit of his garment. And as many as touched it were completely healed.
Amen. Amen. All right. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Shannon, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, Shannon's going to take us into chapter 15 and read verses 1 through 14.
Then there came to Yeshua scribes and Pharisees from Jerusalem, saying, Why do your taught ones transgress the tradition of the elders? For they do not wash their hands when they eat bread. But he answering said to them, Why do you also transgress the command of Elohim because of your tradition? For Elohim has commanded, saying, Respect your father and your mother, and he who curses father or mother, let him be put to death. But you say, whoever says to his father or mother, Whatever profit you might have received from me has been dedicated, is certainly released from respecting his father or mother. So you have nullified the command of Elohim by your tradition. Hypocrites. Yeshayahu rightly prophesied about you, saying, This people draw near to me with their mouth, and respect me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. But in vain do they worship me, teaching as teachings the commands of men. And calling the crowd near, he said to them, Hear and understand. Not that which goes into the mouth defiles the man, but that which comes out of the mouth, this defiles the man. Then his taught ones came and said to him, Do you know that the Pharisees stumbled when they heard this word? But he answering said, Every plant which my heavenly Father has not planted shall be uprooted. Leave them alone, they are blind leaders of the blind, and if the blind leads the blind, both shall fall into a ditch.
All right, thank you. Amen. Okay, Erica. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Erica, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, Erica is going to take us now from verse 15 to the end of the chapter.
And Kepha answering said to him, Explain this parable to us. And Yeshua said, Are you also still without understanding? Do you not understand that whatever enters into the mouth goes into the stomach and is cast out in the sewer? But what comes out of the mouth comes from the heart, and these defile the man. For out of the heart comes forth wicked reasonings, murders, adulteries, warrings, thefts, false witnessing, slanders. These defile the man, but to eat with unwashed hands does not defile the man. And Yeshua went out from there and withdrew to the parts of Tor and Sidon. And see, a woman of Canaan came from the borders and cried out to him, saying, Have compassion on me, O Master, son of David. My daughter is badly demon-possessed. But he did not answer her a word. And his taught ones came and asked him, saying, Send her away, because she cries after us. And he answering said, I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But she came and was bowing to him, saying, Master, help me. And he answering said, It is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. But she said, Yes, Master, for even the little dogs eat the crumbs which fall from the master's table. And Yeshua answering said to her, O woman, your belief is great. Let it be to you as you desire. And her daughter was healed from that hour. And moving from there, Yeshua came towards the Sea of Galilee, and going up on the mountain, he was sitting there, and large crowds came to him, having with them those who were lame, blind, dumb, crippled, and many others. And they laid them down at the feet of Yeshua, and he healed them, so that the crowd marveled when they saw the dumb speaking, the crippled well, the lame walking, and the blind seeing. And they praised Elohim of Israel. And Yeshua, having called his taught ones near, said, I have compassion on the crowd, because they have now continued with me 3 days and do not have whatever to eat. And I do not wish to send them away hungry, lest they faint on the way. And his taught ones said to him, Where are we to get enough bread in the desert to satisfy such a large crowd? And Yeshua said to them, How many loaves do you have? And they said, 7, and a few little fish. And he commanded the crowd to sit down on the ground. And taking the 7 loaves and the fish, giving thanks, he broke them and gave to his taught ones, and the taught ones to the crowd. And all ate and were satisfied, and they picked up what was left over of the broken pieces, 7 large baskets filled. And those who ate were 4,000 men, besides women and children. And dismissing the crowd, he went into the boat and came to the borders of Magdala.
Amen. Amen. Okay, Amy. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Amy, who's come out down to Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless her and her family, and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, Amy's going to take us now to chapter 16 and go to verse 14.
And the Pharisees and Sadducees came, and trying him, asked that he would show them a sign from heaven. And he, answering, said to them, When it is evening, you say, Fair weather, for the heaven is red. And in the morning, stormy weather today, for the heaven is red and overcast. You know how to discern the face of the heaven, but you are unable to discern the sign of the times. A wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and no sign shall be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. And he left them and went away. And his taught ones came to the other side and had forgotten to take bread. And Yeshua said to them, Mind and beware the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, Because we brought no bread. But Yeshua, aware of this, said to them, O you of little belief, why do you reason among yourselves because you brought no bread? Do you still not understand? Large baskets you picked up. How is it that you do not understand that I did not speak to you concerning bread, but to beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees? Then they understood that he did not say to beware of the leaven of bread, but of the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Now when Yeshua came into the parts of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his taught ones, saying, Who do men say the son of Adam is? And they said, Some say you are Yochanan the Immerser, and others Eliyahu, and others Yirmiyahu, or one of the prophets.
Amen. Amen. Okay, next up is Jonathan. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Jonathan, who's come up down to Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Jonathan's going to take us from verse 15 to the end of the chapter.
He said to them, And you who do not say I am? And Shimon Kepha answering said, You are the Messiah. He said to them, And you, who do you say I am? And Shimon Kepha answering said, You are the Messiah, the Son of the living Elohim. And Yeshua answering said to him, Blessed are you, Shimon Bar Yonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in the heavens. And I also say to you that you are Kepha, and on this rock you shall build my assembly, and the gates of Sheol shall not overcome it. And I shall give you the keys of the reign of the heavens, and whatever you bind on earth shall be having been bound in the heavens, and whatever you loosen on earth shall be having been loosed in the heavens. Then he warned his taught ones that they should say to no one that he is Yeshua the Messiah. From that time, Yeshua began to show to his taught ones that it was necessary for him to go to Jerusalem and to suffer much from the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and to be raised again the third day. And Kepha took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, "Be kind to yourself, Master, this shall not be to you." But he turned and said to Kepha, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for your thoughts are not those of Elohim, but those of men." Then Yeshua said to his taught ones, "If anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his stake and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life shall lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake shall find it. For what is a man profited if he gains all the world and loses his own life? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his life? For the Son of Adam is going to come in the esteem of his Father with his messengers, and then he shall reward each according to his works. Truly, I say to you, there are some standing here who shall not taste death at all until they see the Son of Adam coming in his reign."
All right. Awesome. Adrian. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Adrian who's come up down to Yahweh and the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Adrian's going to take us now to chapter 17 and read verses 1 through 13.
And after 6 days, Yeshua took Kepha and Jacob and Yochanan, his brother, and brought them on a high mountain by themselves. And he was transformed before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his garments became white as the light. And see, Moshe and Eliyahu appeared to them, talking with him. And Kepha answering said to Yeshua, "Master, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, let us make here 3 booths, one for you, one for Moshe, and one for Eliyahu." And when he was still speaking, And while he was still speaking, see, a bright cloud overshadowed them. And see, a voice came out of the cloud saying, "This is my son, the beloved, in whom I did delight. Hear him." And when the taught ones heard, they fell on their faces and were much afraid. But Yeshua came near and touched them and said, "Rise and do not be afraid." And having lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Yeshua only. And as they were coming down from the mountain, Yeshua commanded them, saying, "Do not mention the vision to anyone until the Son of Adam is raised from the dead." And his taught one asked him, saying, "Why then do the scribes say that Eliyahu has to come first?" And Yeshua answering said to them, "Eliyahu is indeed coming first, and shall restore all. But I say to you that Eliyahu has already come, and did not recognize him, but did to him whatever they wished. And in this way the Son of Adam is also about to suffer by them." The taught ones understood that he had spoken to them about Yochanan, the immerser.
Excuse me. Amen. Amen. All right, Janet. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Janet, who's come down to Yahweh and the Torah. May the set apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, Janet's going to take us now from verse 14 to the end of chapter 17.
And when they came to the crowd, a man came up to him, kneeling down to him and saying, Master, have compassion on my son, for he is an epileptic and suffers badly, for he often falls into the fire and often into the water. And I brought him to your taught ones, but they were unable to heal him. And Yeshua answering said, O generation unbelieving and perverted, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring him here to me. And Yeshua rebuked the demon, and he came out of him, and the child was healed for that hour. Then the taught ones came to Yeshua by himself and said, Why were we unable to cast him out? And Yeshua said to him, Because of your unbelief. For truly I say to you, if you have belief as a mustard seed, you shall say to this mountain, Move from here and there to there, and it shall move, and no matter shall be impossible for you. But this kind does not go out except through prayer and fasting. And while they were staying in Galilee, Yeshua said to them, The Son of Adam is about to be delivered up into the hands of men, and they shall kill him, and the third day he shall be raised up. And they were deeply grieved. And when they came into Capernaum, those who received the tax came to Kepha and said, Does your teacher not pay the tax? He said, Yes. And when he came into the house, Yeshua spoke to him first, saying, What do you think, Shimon? From whom do the sovereigns of the earth take toll or tax? From their own sons or from the strangers? Kepha then said to him, From the strangers. Yeshua said to him, Then the sons are exempt. But lest we cause them to stumble, go to the sea, cast in a hook, and take the fish that comes up first. And when you have opened its mouth, you shall find a stater. Take that and give it to them for me and you.
Okay, amen. Oops. All right, Bob. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Bob, who's come up down to Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, we're going to go now into chapter 18 and read the first 17 verses.
At that time, the taught ones came to Yeshua, saying, Who then is the greatest in the reign of the heavens? And Yeshua called a little child to him, set him in their midst, and said, Truly I say to you, unless you turn and become as little children, you shall by no means enter into the reign of the heavens. Whoever then humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the reign of the heavens. And whoever receives one little child like this in my name receives me. But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it is better for him that a millstone be hung around his neck and that he be drowned in the depth of the sea. Woe to the world because of stumbling blocks, for it is necessary that stumbling blocks come, but woe to that man by whom the stumbling block comes. And if your hand or foot causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away from you. It is better for you to enter into the life lame or crippled, rather than having 2 hands or 2 feet to be thrown into the everlasting fire. And if your eye causes you to stumble, pluck it out and throw it away from you. It is better for you to enter into life with 1 eye, rather than having 2 eyes to be thrown into the fire of Gehenna. See that you do not despise one of these little ones. For I say to you that in the heavens their messengers always see the face of the Father who is in the heavens. For the Son of Adam has come to save what was lost. What do you think? If a man has 100 sheep and one of them goes astray, would he not leave the 99 on the mountains, going to seek the one that is astray? And if he should find it, truly I say to you, he rejoices more over that sheep than over the 99 that did not go astray. Thus it is not the desire of your Father who is in the heavens that one of these little ones should be lost. And if your brother sins against you, go and convict him between you and him alone. If he hears you, you have gained your brother. But if he does not hear, take with you one or two more, that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word might be established. And if he refuses to hear them, say it to the assembly. And if he refuses even to hear the assembly, let him be to you like the nations and the tax collectors.
Amen. Amen. All right, William. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless William, who's come up down to Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, William's now going to take us from verse 8, where are we? Verse 18 to the end of chapter 18.
Truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loosen on earth shall have been loosened in heaven. Again, I say to you that if 2 of you agree on earth concerning any matter they asked, it shall be done for them by my Father in the heavens. For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there I am in the midst. Then Kepha came to him and said, Master, how often shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? Up to 7 times. Yeshua said to him, I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. Because of this, the reign of the heavens is like a certain man, a sovereign who wished to settle his accounts with his servants. And when it had begun to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. But as he was unable to pay, his master commanded that he be sold, with his wife and children, and all that he had, and payment to be made. Then the servant fell down before him, saying, Master, have patience with me, I shall pay you all. And the master of that servant was moved with compassion, released him, and forgave him the debt. And that servant went out and found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii, and he laid his hands on him and took him by the throat, saying, Pay me what you owe. Then his fellow servants fell down at his feet and begged him, saying, Have patience with me, and I shall pay you all. But he would not. He went and threw himself into prison till he should pay the debt. And when his fellow servants saw what had been done, they were deeply grieved, and came and reported it to their master and all that had taken place. Then his master called him and said to him, Wicked servant, I forgave you all the debt, seeing you begged me. Should you not also have compassion on your fellow servant, as I have had compassion on you? And his master was wroth, and delivered him to the torturers until he should pay all that was due to him. So also my heavenly Father shall do to you, if each of you from his heart does not forgive his brother his trespasses.
Amen. All right, and we're going to need one more. Oh, there he goes. Come on up, Harold. Good. Perfect. Lisa. I remembered. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Lisa, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, Lisa's going to take us now into chapter 19 and read the first 15 verses.
And it came to be, when Yeshua had ended these words, that he left Galilee and came to the borders of Yehuda beyond the Jordan. And the large crowds followed him, and he healed them there. And the Pharisees came to him, trying him, and saying to him, Is it right for a man to put away his wife for every reason? And he, answering, said to them, Did you not read that he who made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, For this cause a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh? So that they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what Elohim has joined together, let man not separate. They said to him, Why then did Moshe command to give a certificate of divorce and to put her away? He said to them, Because of the hardness of your hearts, Moshe allowed you to put away your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. And I say to you, whoever puts away his wife, except on the ground of whoring, and marries another, commits adultery. And whoever marries her who has been put away commits adultery. His taught ones said to him, If such is the case of the man with his wife, is it good not to marry? And he said to them, it is good not to marry. And he said to them, Not all receive this word, but only those to whom it has been given. For there are eunuchs who were so born from their mother's womb, and there are eunuchs who were made eunuchs by men, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the reign of the heavens. He who is able to receive it, let him receive it. Then young children were brought to him to lay his hands on them and pray, and the taught ones rebuked them. But Yeshua said, Allow the young children, and do not stop them from coming to me, for of such is the reign of the heavens. And having laid hands on them, he went from there.
Amen. Amen. All right. Mr. Kevin, he who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Kevin who's come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Kevin, take us from verse 16 to the end of the chapter.
And see, one came and said to him, Good teacher, what good shall I do to have everlasting life? And he said to him, Why do you call me good? No one is good except one, Elohim. But if you wish to enter into life, guard the commands. He said to him, Which? And Yeshua said, You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness. Respect your father and your mother, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. The young man said to him, All these I have watched over from my youth. What do I still lack? Yeshua said to him, If you wish to be perfect, go, sell what you have and give to the poor, and you shall have treasure in heaven, and come follow me. And when the young man heard the word, he went away sad, because he had many possessions. And Yeshua said to his taught ones, Truly, I say to you, that it is hard for a rich man to enter into the reigns of the heavens. And again I say to you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the reign of Elohim. And when his taught ones heard it, they were very astonished, saying, Who then is able to be saved? And looking intently, Yeshua said to them, With men this is impossible, but with Elohim all is possible. Then Kepha answering said to him, See, we have left all and followed you. What then shall we have? And Yeshua said to them, Truly I say to you, when the Son of Adam sits on the throne of his esteem, you who have followed me in the rebirth shall also sit on the 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And everyone who has left houses, or brothers, or sisters, or father, or mother, or wife, or children, or lands, for my name's sake, shall receive 100-fold, and shall inherit everlasting life. But many who are first shall be last, and the last first.
Amen. Amen. Okay, thank you, Kevin. All right, and our last reader is Harold. He's going to finish it up for today. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Harold, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Harold's going to take us into chapter 20 and read verses 1 through 16.
For the reign of heavens is like a man, a householder who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. And when he had agreed with them, with the workers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard. And he went out about the third hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and said to them, You too go into the vineyard, and whatever is right I shall give you. And they went. And having gone out again about the 6th and 9th hour, he did likewise. And about the 11th hour, having gone out, he found others standing idle, and said to them, Why do you stand here idle all day? And they said to him, Because no one has hired us. He said to them, You go into the vineyard, and whatever is right you shall receive. And when evening came, the master of the vineyard said to his manager, Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last to the first. And when those who came who were hired about the 11th hour, they each received a denarius. And when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but they too received each a silver piece. And when they received it, they grumbled against the householder, saying, These last have worked only 1 hour, and you made them equal to us, who have borne the burden in the heat of the day. But he answering said to one of them, Friend, I do you not wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take yours and go. But I wish give this last man as also to you. Is it not right for me to do what I wish with my own? Or is your eye evil because I am good? Thus the last shall be first, and the first last. For many are called, but few are chosen.
Amen. Amen. Okay, thank you to all the readers. Appreciate that very much. All right, I guess we can skip the discussion because there wasn't a whole lot covered in those chapters there. So there's nothing there to really, I'm sure nobody has any questions or anything to talk about, so. Wow, that was a lot of stuff, wasn't it? Amen. Really good. Okay. So this is what we're going to do. So we're going to go ahead now and discuss the Torah portion. The way we do this, actually, you have the mic, Steve? Okay, good. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to have you raise your hands, and we're going to have you, if you have a comment or question, it'd be helpful if you could come up towards the front. Okay, Marty, where do you want them to come up by? Yeah, where do you want them to come if they have them start to move up towards? Well, we have the other mic. You want to put the stand there? Okay. Now, some of you, of course, we can bring the mic to you, but it'd just be easier to line a few people up and see how we can work this out. And there are some empty chairs right here in the first and second row that if you want to comment or make a question, you can come and seat yourself in the chair and get yourself ready. Okay, so while they're setting this up, let me just kind of remind us that what we're going to do is discuss the portion. Well, you can have a comment, you can have a question. If somebody does make a comment or ask a question, certainly if you would like to have something to say about it, just raise your hand or come up here, and we will be able to get you to be involved in the discussion. And then after everybody's finished, I'll tell you what it really is. Okay, no, I'm kidding. No, I'll be here to just moderate it and hopefully keep things in shalom, okay, and answer some of the questions that needed to be answered by me. Okay? I'm going to wait for Marty to tell me we're good. All right? Okay. So first comment or question. Hopefully we're going to do this somewhat, it doesn't have to be perfect, but somewhat chronologically, beginning with things that are going on in chapter 14 and then working forward. Okay? So that we catch the context and the flow. Anybody want to say something about chapter 14? Okay, Amy's coming up.
It's actually in 14, and I had noticed it before in 15, but today I noticed it in 14 also.
Okay.
In 14:19, it says, He blessed and broke and gave the loaves to the taught ones, and then the taught ones gave to the crowds. And then in 1536, he broke them and gave to his taught ones, and the taught ones to the crowd. So that is, to me, the leadership gives. It's not like a direct, there's
a vertical structure there that's in. Okay, wonderful. Excellent. Did everybody else catch that? These are things that you can read over and over again going, wait, I kind of missed that fact. It was right there, and and here's another thing that I want to point out about that I wrote down a little note also about this with the fishes and the loaves. Notice that what he did was he appreciated and gave thanks for what was there. He said, I only have a few loaves and a few fish, and so he said, thank you. And then the abundance was provided. Catch that lesson for yourselves in your lives. First, appreciate what you have and say thank you. And then maybe more abundance will come to meet the needs. Now, by abundance, I mean the needs to be met. I'm not saying that, the diamonds coming out of your belly button and the gold dust in the air and all that stuff. But what he needed was to feed the crowd, and he didn't have enough. But he first said, thank you for what I've got. I think we have to remember that, because sometimes people think of it more in terms of, well, he prayed before they ate. Well, that's not the point here. He was appreciating what he had because he needed more. He wanted to first let Abba know, I appreciate what we have. Amen? And then he trusted the more that was needed would be provided. Because he already told them, sit everybody down, we're going to do this. Okay, he didn't have any fear, didn't have any doubt. Awesome. Okay, next comment or question. Okay, Jonathan, you can come up. Okay, and of course, okay, Norma can come up.
Yes, you gave me the answer yesterday, but I want to have it for the video. The question related to birthday celebrations. Some people don't celebrate birthdays because of horrible things happen, and they are recorded in the scriptures. So I would like your input about it.
Okay. Now, so one of the things that's sort of a big deal with the Jehovah's Witnesses, especially with some groups, is this idea of being that birthdays are evil and terrible because there's not a single verse telling you not to celebrate them. But there are only a few accounts of births being celebrated. By the way, there are other births being celebrated in Scripture, and they're joyful. But we do have this horrible thing happening here with Herodes and Herodias. We also have things with Pharaoh. So we do see some of those things. But let's understand that it's not commanded. Look, the scriptures are very clear about some do's and don'ts. And there's enough of those do's and don'ts that we don't have to necessarily be looking for the hints and then try to think that we understand the hints. There's no hint here. It's just a statement of fact that it was on this event that this person in a very selfish way wanted to have this selfish, terrible thing happen to Yochanan HaMatbil, John the Immerser. So let's just recognize that there is no problem with birthdays. Now, the problem is being self-possessed. So if you're one of those birthday terrorists or birthday lunatics, and there are a few where that day has to be all about you and everything. Anybody know people like that? Okay? It's their birthday, and how dare you not recognize it? Make sure you elevate them to the highest level of possibilities and come and bow at their feet and kiss their ring, That's not what we should be doing. What is a birthday actually? It is the marking of time. And there are significant markings of time. Do we not celebrate often as husbands and wives? Do we not celebrate anniversaries? Because it reminds us of the marking of time together. And there are significant anniversaries. We have numbers that we have come to commonly believe are significant, like 10 or 25 or 50. And so in our age goings, we have significant times like turning a teenager, 13, or turning into an adult, which could be 18 or 21 according to the way the laws work. Or hitting significance like 25 or turning 50. Well, I didn't really think that was so significant, but anyway. Okay? But these are markings of time. So I don't believe that there's a problem with birthdays. What I do believe is that we have to be careful of how we behave in them. My personal belief is, if possible, on your birthday, you should take out your mother. She did all the work. Come on, you can clap for that. What did the kid do? He came out and did nothing, cried, okay? Mom did everything for 9 months and did all the work. The child should come to mom and say, thank you for going through all of that for me. I think kids should take their moms out on their birthdays, okay? That's just my thought. It makes sense to me, okay? And by the way, as somebody who did not remember my mother's birthday until I was about 23, I just don't remember significant dates. I've been terrible at it my whole life. But I always remembered my own, so it would be much easier for me to do something for her on my day, okay? Because I can remember my birthday, okay? Actually, I often forget that it is my birthday when it comes by. It just passes right through until somebody actually says something to me. I'm just too busy doing whatever. But understand, that's the thing with birthdays, okay? It is culturally, it has been culturally imposed that birthdays are evil, you shouldn't do them. Now, on that note, let me just give one little caveat. Do not do them as a celebration on Shabbat. Amen. Shabbat is Shabbat. We do not do funerals. We do not do weddings. We do not do birthdays. We do Shabbat on Shabbat. Okay? This is an important thing. It's a hard thing. It will wreck things with your family when you say, I can't come to that funeral, or I can't come to that wedding, or I can't come to that birthday. But it's your grandmother's 80th birthday. Well, who told you to put it on Saturday? You knew I was a Shabbat keeper. You knew I wouldn't come. At least they should know that you won't come. Your family should know what you won't do on Shabbat. Okay, my family might forget every now and then, believe it or not, even though they're Jewish, they'll forget sometimes that they try to schedule something. And I'll say, but it's Shabbat. And they'll go, oh yeah. And then they'll go ahead and realize either A, I'm not coming, or B, they'll reschedule it. Okay? But your family should know. And by the way, we have it in these verses at the end, actually. So here I am breaking my own rules, going to chapter 19. But this is important. It says at the very end of our readings today that everyone who has left houses, brothers, sisters, father or mother, wife or children, or lands, or significant family events, for my name's sake. But you don't understand, Rabbi, if I don't go to my grandson's graduation and it's on Saturday, my daughter will never talk to me again. Matthew 19, verse 29, and everyone who has left, what are you not willing to lose for him? What are you not willing to lose? But you don't understand if I don't. No, I understand. You're the one who doesn't understand. I understand. It's going to be awful. It's going to be painful. It's going to have huge ramifications in the physical realm. But if you go, it'll have bigger ramifications in the vertical realm. Well, I'm not going to say feelings. I'm not going to say that the Creator is reacting through feelings. But who are you looking to protect from offending? But my mother will be offended. I don't know. My Creator might get offended. Or disappointed. Well, you don't understand how disappointed they'll be. Well, how disappointed will Yahweh and Yeshua be when you go? Who are you putting first? But you don't understand, if I don't go to work on Saturday, my boss will fire me. Well, no, you don't understand. You can get a better job. Why do you need to be so afraid of what your boss is going to do? Whoever has been willing to leave all these things behind, it says, they shall inherit everlasting life. Okay, towards the end of this reading today, there was a bunch of things that had to do with what shall I do to inherit everlasting life? And the answer is keep the covenant. Do what he says and don't do what he says not to do. Amen? Amen. Because I do still find people, where they have to leave services early or they don't show up because their child had to go to a birthday party. Worse, because they were hosting one. It's okay to celebrate things not exactly on the exact day. Nothing terrible happens. No, like this. The sun will still shine. okay? You'll still have your pulse going through your body. You'll still be breathing. I mean, you don't actually have to be on the exact date. It's okay. You can wait a day or two and it'll be fine. Okay? All right, so hopefully that answered the question. Okay, next up, Jonathan. Wait, I'm sorry. Did you have something to say about that, Kathy?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about bar and bat mitzvahs.
Okay, so the question is about bar and bat mitzvahs. You can do a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah on Shabbat. Don't have the party until after sundown. Okay? Because a bar and bat mitzvah simply should be that child. Well, I'll give you two scenarios. In the normal traditional Jewish bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, the child comes up and leads the service. So it's still the service. It's still a Shabbat service. There's nothing more or less. It's all about still the normal Shabbat. Just the child is being elevated to the opportunity to lead or to lead the liturgy or whatever it is that is in that congregation that they would get to do. What we've been doing in our congregation is that we've come to recognize that 13-year-olds, which is the age where you normally bar a bat mitzvah, are not the same in their level of understanding and maturity today that they would have been back 2,000 years ago. And so it's a significant coming-of-age ritual that our children aren't coming of age for. They're the physical age for it, but they're not prepared for this. Our children do not mature at the speed that the children did before because we don't give them the responsibilities and they don't have that kind of a life. And so what we have been doing in our congregation is when the child turns 13, if they desire, they can come up in front of the congregation and basically make a commitment to study and prepare for mikveh at 20. So it's kind of like a promise ring that you would wear, like, in case you were thinking, or like an engagement ring because you're thinking about getting married. Well, no, this is a commitment of the child to go ahead and now look and study and be prepared for the coming of age at age 20. Book of Numbers tells us that's the age of majority in the scriptures. And so that's what we do with our teenagers, okay? Because otherwise it'll be like what I did when I was a teenager. I was bar mitzvahed. And that was the last time they ever saw me in synagogue until they got me to blow the shofar for them on Yom Kippur and on trumpets, okay? So until I got to be the shofar blower, I didn't go anymore. That was sort of like, okay, I've got my party, I've got a bunch of money given to me as gifts, like a wedding thing, right? People give you gifts and they say, thank you very much, have a nice life. Because I wasn't emotionally ready at 13 for that level of commitment. And neither are our children, generally. Some of you sit there and go, well, my daughter, my son. Okay, maybe you're the exception. Okay? Generally. Okay, that's not the case. So would it be okay? So if your family members, like if you have Jewish family members and they're having a bar mitzvah, I did this with my wife and my children. My son was a little baby. I don't remember if my daughter was born yet or she was just a baby, whatever. But we went to one of my cousin's children's bat mitzvahs. But I told them, we are not coming to the quote unquote, the party, the dinner, whatever, until after sundown. Now, it worked out that it was an afternoon service, and it was only like an hour before sundown, and we just went back to the hotel and waited, and then came back and went to enjoy the party. And so you have to know how you're drawing those lines. So we went to the service, and it was a Shabbat service, and the children led the service. Nothing wrong with that. Now, if they had it in the morning and had a lunch party, we just wouldn't have gone. Does that make sense? Does everybody understand? Okay, excellent. Jonathan, you're up.
My question is based off of the beginning of 15. So if somebody has, if
That's
we're
okay.
still
Go with 15.
In the beginning of 15, chapter 15, there's the reoccurrence of the Pharisees coming to the
let him hold the mic.
To the top.
Grab the mic, John.
There's a reoccurrence of the Pharisees coming to the taught ones and asking them a question while Yeshua is still there. And I'm wondering, is this? They knew he was their teacher. They knew that he was in their presence, but they still asked the question to the taught ones. Was that strategic in their spite, or was that just...
Show me what you're talking about.
Then there came to Yeshua scribes and Pharisees from Yerushalayim, saying, why do your taught ones... Oh, well...
They're still talking to Yeshua.
Okay, all right. And then okay.
He talked himself right into realizing that, well, okay. Chapter 15 is very important, though. Okay? And I want to just connect a few dots here real quickly. First of all, verses 1 through 6 are talking about tradition, okay? It is not talking about kashrut or the kosher laws with food. It is talking about washings. Okay, this is talking about a tradition called nitilat yadayim, the washing of the hands, a ritual that it was done very commonly before eating. As a matter of fact, Jews today still will do this, especially right before the Passover. Okay, in the Jewish Passover Haggadah, one of the things that you do is you recite Netilat Yadayim, and you go ahead and have somebody will come around with a pitcher of water and a towel and a basin, and they'll pour once on the left and once on the right, and they go through the ritual. The issue here is that they said, why do your students, your taught ones, transgress the tradition of the elders? Do you notice it never says Torah here anywhere? Now, of course, Yeshua turns it around and then he brings it into Torah. He says, well, but you guys have a few traditions that mess with the Torah. Nothing my students is doing is breaking any Torah. He says, and now listen now, for they do not wash their hands when they eat bread. No pork going on here. Nobody had a bowl of shrimp. They were eating bread. This is for all your Christian friends. Mark chapter 7 is exactly the same. They were eating bread. The issue was washing their hands in a traditional manner. Okay, this is confirmed, by the way, in verse 20. He said, Yeshua says, look, well, we'll go first. He says, it says, do you understand that it's not what enters the mouth, verse 17? Okay, but it goes into the stomach, is cast into the sewer. But what comes out of the mouth comes from the heart, and these defile man. For out of the heart comes forth wicked reasonings. He goes and explains those. He says, these defile the man, but to eat with unwashed hands does not. He didn't say, but to eat whatever you want does not. He says, to eat with unwashed hands does not. So it was never about what the food was. He says, you guys are worried about that somehow the bread will be a problem going into my stomach because I didn't do this ritual. He says, I'm saying it's a bigger problem is these issues of the heart, these reasonings of murders and adulteries and whorings and thefts and false witnessings and slanders, etc. So when he says it's not what goes in, he's being very specific to the fact that we're talking about a tradition of washing before eating something appropriate. Let's be clear that this had nothing to do with the food laws. This had to do with a pre-eating ritual. And your Christian friends will argue with you, and that's fine. But you can show them this more clearly here than in Mark, and also explain to them that where it says, and thus Jesus made all foods clean in the NIV, that's Zondervan put that in there, the publisher, okay? That's not in the Greek. It's not in any other translations. Well, some newer ones have copied that. But that's where you first find it, really, is with the NIV. So let's understand and recognize that that's what's going on in chapter 15. This is about traditions. Now, what he does say is you need to be careful because there are traditions that are a problem. He said the traditions where you end up breaking the Torah. He says, look, he says, why do you transgress? He says, for Elohim has commanded, saying, respect your father and mother. He says to them, why do you also transgress the command of Elohim? Because of your traditions. Not all of them. He names a few situations. He said, Elohim says in the fifth commandment, respect your mother and your father. And he who curses father or mother, let him be put to death. But you say, whoever says to his father or mother, whatever profit you might have received from me has been dedicated or given to the temple, is certainly released from respecting his father and mother, so you have nullified. That's the problem. A tradition was just used to nullify a commandment of Elohim. He says, you have nullified a command of Elohim by your tradition. He says, let's not be getting in my students' faces, or mine, because they're not doing a tradition that has no issue with Torah. Never does he tell them it's wrong to do the hand washing. Okay, not once does he say, oh, that hand washing thing is wrong, they don't need to do it. He just says it's not necessary to do. It's a tradition. You have traditions too. When you were Christian, you had plenty of them. Every organization, every organized anything has traditions. Your family has traditions. You grew up with traditions that were just personal to the way your family did certain things. Traditions are great at times. They help bring flavor. They help remind us of things to do. They keep us on schedule with, in a mindset of things. Some of you light candles before you have Shabbat. There's no scripture reference to make you do that. However, it's a good tradition because it reminds you that that time is now being separated. Once you light the candles, you know it's Shabbat. Some people in my wife's parents' family, they would go in the living room and the father would read a verse and then they would pray as a family, and that's how they started Shabbat. And so the family knew from that point forward it was Shabbat. So traditions can help you in a mindset. Just make sure your tradition doesn't do one of the two things that are a problem. One is that it causes a nullification of a Torah command. It interferes with commandment in some way, a commandment. The second is that your tradition gets elevated like they're doing here. Why do your students, they're acting as if they had broken Torah. They had broken a Torah command. And he's like, but it's not a Torah command, relax. Because some of you will get very upset with your children because they forgot to pray before they eat. Now you can ask them, you can be frustrated because you're disrespecting your authority and your tradition, but just recognize that you don't want to make them feel like they just broke a commandment. It's very important because praying before you eat is not a commandment, but it's a good tradition. Thinking of him before you do anything and recognizing him in all you do is a good thing to do. If you were Jewish, you would have a prayer for every moment, before, during, and after. Okay? As a matter of fact, you'll spend more time doing that than the actual thing you're doing. Okay? But when you turn it, see, that's the problem with the Talmudic Jews. They have a confusion of where Talmud belongs in terms of, is it tradition and application, or is it equal to or above Torah? The average Jew doesn't know the difference. As a matter of fact, they often treat the Talmudic stuff above the Torah. And so that's where we get the problems, okay? And so let's understand that. As a matter of fact, my father would have a conversation with some of his friends, and then he'd come home and ask me, yeah, they were talking about this. Was that Talmud or was that Torah? Because they don't know. They're taught it equally as if it's the same stuff. All right? All right, Dawid, go ahead.
Okay, so I had noticed something from the ISR 2009 translation of what was going on in chapter 17, and it's also repeated in chapter 3, or it's said first in chapter 3 and repeated in chapter 17. Okay. And it's the part where Yeshua goes into the water in chapter 3, and then he comes out, and the voice speaks, okay? And the voice basically says, this is my son, the beloved, in whom I delight. Now, if that was said in the Hebrew, most likely one of the ways it would be translated into the Hebrew would be David, and David being a euphemism for Messiah. And the same thing is said in chapter 17, this is my son, the beloved, in whom I am well pleased. Hear you him. And so the beloved being David, Messiah. And it's just ironic to me that they kept asking him for a sign, and he said, you wicked and adulterous generation, there's no sign going to be given but the sign of the prophet Jonah. Why? Because you already got a sign that was public when I was mikvah. So that was just my comment.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. In the teaching, no other name, I think. Also in the Father and the Son. Actually, the Father and the Son. Okay. In some of the Gospels, it actually tries to make the case that only he heard that in chapter 3. Okay? And nobody else got to hear that. Kind of like when Paul had his experience and nobody else heard it or saw it. Okay? So I don't know that actually connects. It does connect, but not that way necessarily. Now in chapter 17, we also have, because I've made the case that when Yeshua says, no one has heard the Father's voice at any time, okay, then what about this, they'll say, and what about that? Well, okay, so chapter 3, we see this in one of the other Gospels, it says he heard it. And also, in chapter 17, it's happening in a vision. Okay? And it's clear that this is a vision because in chapter 17, it says in verse 9, and they, as they were coming down from the mountain, Yeshua commanded them, saying, do not mention the vision to anyone. So everything was in a vision. It wasn't the actual thing. So it was concealed, okay? All right. Next question. Okay, Candace?
Okay, I have some comments and then some questions. So I'll just tell you everything and then you can carry it from there.
Okay.
Well, you kind of answered the one about in 1546 about the parents, but I wasn't quite sure what it was they were doing and how they were actually transgressing the commands of Torah. And then in 1524, where the woman is asking for healing, and Yeshua replied was that he didn't come but for the lost sheep of Israel. Was my question on that was Yeshua recognizing that the woman was a lost sheep of Israel? And then in 1536, the comment on that about giving thanks. My sister Linda, and she's a Christian, but this was very wise advice she gave me. And I try to remember it, but sometimes I forget that if you can't find something, which I lose things, I can't find things, if I'll just stop and say, thank you, Father, for helping me find it, and give him praise, then I'll find it quicker. And I have found that in most cases to really be true.
Okay, awesome.
And then in Matthew 18, about harming a child, I think he meant also a child, young child, as well as a new believer being child, that we can hinder them. And I think
I agree.
Having been a child of abuse and everything, that has caused me problems in my walk with God. You can forgive somebody, but it doesn't end the effects that it has on a person for the rest of their life. So that was my comment, but also, could you elaborate on humbling yourself as a child?
Okay. I forgot the first 5 things you asked. No. She took notes during this thing and had her comments ready. Okay, let's try to work through these. We can even start with the last part, okay? There's an important sort of message he's trying to give us about this idea of not hindering a child, how we treat children. And I think that we should consider that also newborn believers or new believers as being like children. They're very fragile and they're innocent and they don't understand and they run off in wrong directions often and they're self-assured but they don't know what they're doing. I mean, all kinds of things. They think about what children do and how they can get themselves in all kinds of trouble because they just don't know what they're doing. Mostly what you would say about a child is they don't know what they don't know, okay? And so I think that that's a really good point that we should be talking about. As far as humbling, humbling yourself, there's still within the child the understanding that they do need others to provide for them. The child will run to you and ask for help. The child will come to you to cling to you. The child will put their hands to be picked up. The child has that level of, I know that I need others. I may get an attitude now and then, but ultimately I realize I can't do it. Even the child who says, leave me alone, I'll do it, and you just stand there hovering going, okay. And then eventually they look at you like, no, I really can't. Okay, and that's kind of where the humbleness comes. But they're going through that growth where they're not always so humble, but they get it at some point. They're more quick to realize, actually, you know what, I can't do this. As they get older, that happens less and less, and we become more and more self-assured that it just doesn't work out. Beyond that, that stand doesn't go a whole lot higher. So be careful how high you put it. Good. Okay. All right? So this is really important that we kind of understand as we go through this. Okay, see if I can remember as we go through these questions. This will be good. Okay, so question number 1. Okay, you wanted to know about what was going on with them with the fifth commandment and the problem in chapter 15. They had a tradition where, now you have to understand we have a different type of society. When you were the firstborn and the parents got to a certain point in their age and their health, etc., they would transfer everything to that firstborn. And then the firstborn, having inherited it, would also be required to take care of their parents. Not just take it for themselves and run off, okay? And so the child who didn't like his parent would donate this or dedicate it to the temple, saying, oh, I'm sorry, Mom, Dad, don't have anything to take care of you with, I gave it to the temple. It was a spiteful, harsh thing to do. Wouldn't even mind using the word evil there, okay? It was a very mean-spirited thing to do. That doesn't mean that parents hadn't maybe earned some of that by who knows what kind of parents they were. But this is a thing that the children were doing. I'm not going to take care of my parents because I've committed the money to the temple. And the elders have said, that's totally appropriate. Okay, do you understand that now? Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, we have this very important verse in verse 24 when Yeshua says something really, really interesting. He says, I was not sent except to the lost. That's all the Christians talk about. No, he says the lost sheep of the house of Israel. That is much different than just the lost. Okay, and so he has another verse in another place where he says, I did not come except to seek and save that which was lost. Okay, I've come to seek and save that which was lost. Now, the church wants you to believe that we are lost. No, you were never lost. You just hadn't opened your eyes yet. You weren't lost. See, if I take this phone and I leave it somewhere or I throw it somewhere or somebody takes it somewhere and I don't know where it is, this which is mine is now lost. I've lost my phone. Yeshua is talking about what he has lost, his sheep. And they are now lost or scattered. And he's going to go find them and regather them and call them from where he scattered them. And so he says, I've not come except for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So this woman is a woman of Canaan, and came from those borders and cried to him. So now it's not really clear if she's either A, of Israel that was scattered, who has become more identified with the conquering groups, and so she's not behaving like an Israelite anymore, or if she's just one who's not of Israel. But she's trying to say, and I'm going to guess that she's of Israel, and she's lost. He said, I've not come except for the lost sheep. And she goes, but Master, help me. He says, it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. Now, the little dogs would have been in those days more of a reference to the Gentiles and or those who assimilated, the assimilated Israelites or Jews specifically in that area. The Samaritans had an awful lot of that, which is why the whole Samaritan thing is a big deal. Because the Samaritans were looked down upon because there was an awful lot of them that were assimilated Israelites or Jews that had gone, when the conquering nations came in, they didn't take everybody away. They took all the leadership, and a lot of the people that were actually producing were left behind to produce. They wanted to leave the farmers and the shepherds, etc., and the other people to make things for the empire that took them over and to be able to pay taxes. They didn't just want to take everybody away and leave the place empty. But there was a tendency then for the captive to start to identify with their captors and assimilate. And this was very much looked down upon. You also have, right before this going on in Matthew, only 100 and something years earlier, the problem with the Maccabees and the Hellenizing. That was a big problem, where the Jews decided, a lot of them decided they wanted to be Greek. And the Hellenization, I don't know if you know this, but the original fighting going on during the time of the Maccabees was Jew on Jew. The non-Hellenistic versus the Hellenistic Jew. And then the Greeks got involved. But it started off Jew on Jew. Okay? And so here he says, now listen, it's not good to throw to the children's bread. Who are the children? Those that are followed. You're called the children of Israel if you're Abraham's seed, if you're keeping the Torah, you're keeping the commandments. And she said, yes, master, but even the little dogs can eat the crumbs which fall from the master's table. So she's saying, in other words, she was recognizing I'm a dog. In other words, I know I'm not generally considered worthy of this, but I want it. In other words, I know I'm owning my stuff. I'm humble enough to say, yes, I get it. But even then, can I still have something? Is there not a way back or a way in? So whether she was Gentile or assimilated Israelite, lost sheep, she's saying, but is there not a crumb for me? And then he said, oh woman, your belief, your faith is great. She wanted what he was bringing, what those around him had so badly. Okay? Well, that's the lesson there. Okay, so that's 1, 2. Okay, what else did you ask?
Well, I was just wondering on that note, if Yeshua recognized that she was one of the lost
It doesn't make it clear. It doesn't make it clear. We have to extrapolate. Okay, that's not clear. What he did say was, whoever she was, she had faith, she was welcome to have a piece.
It almost sounded like, from what you were saying, and it almost made me cry, just the thought of, is there just a crumb for me? Is there, and he says, your belief, that just touches my heart.
Amen. And then, of course, then he heals her daughter. Okay. Was there any other things that I missed? No. No. Okay, good. That was a nice long list. Okay. All right, Dale.
Thank you. This is for Roy. Roy, good to see you, brother.
Okay, Roy's up in Belfast.
Yeah, he's on the men's Marco Polo. This is just a clarification, Rabbi. 18, 18, 19, and 20, where it talks about binding and loosing and 2 or 3 gathered and in my name I'm in the midst. Just an explanation and expounding upon that. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so this actually starts in 16. So let's go to 16:19. Okay, in 16:19, he says with Kepha, he says, and I shall give you the keys of the reign of the heavens, and whatever you bind on the earth shall be having bound in the heavens, and whatever you loose on the earth shall have been loosened in the heavens. So we got to understand, what's the most important piece of this? Context. So what's going on when he was asking me about chapter 18, guess what? That comes after chapter 16. And it's all flowing through, and there's context being developed here. So he says to Peter, he says, you had revealed to you this incredible understanding that I am the Messiah. Okay, I'm the Son of the living Elohim. He says, and on that understanding, the rock, remember, he is the rock. We have a teacher called Yeshua the rock. It's on that understanding, not on Peter himself. Sometimes you got to go into the language to see the play on words. You got Kepha, and you've got the words going like, okay, you little pebble. Okay, on this rock, this information, this idea, this understanding that's been revealed to you, we're going to build everything. Not that Peter was this rock. Okay, but it takes the language to really bring out some of the funny stuff that's going on. Hebrew has the same thing in the nuances. And so then he says, look, he said, I shall build my assembly, and the assembly is going to have structure, and I shall give you the keys of the reign, and whatever you bind, you, the assembly, are going to have the keys. Not just you, Peter. Peter wasn't even in charge. Yaakov was in Jerusalem. Okay? He said, I'm going to give you the assembly. He says, on this rock I shall build my assembly, and I'm going to give you the assembly, the keys of the reign, and whatever you bind on earth shall have been bound, and whatever you loose on earth shall have been loosed in the heavens. Okay. This matches what? Where do we go with this? What is it talking about? Sanhedrin. He's talking about Sanhedrin, but give me where are we on the Bible, though? Where's our scripture for this? Deuteronomy what? 17. Okay, good job. Okay? He's referring to Deuteronomy 17. He is reestablishing a correct Sanhedrin, basically, or a decision-making body. Now, there was one in existence at the time, and there was a temple, and there was a high priest who was an appointee, wasn't a legitimate high priest in Caiaphas. But here we have a reestablishing of proper judgment structure. He said, I'm going to establish my assembly, and my assembly is going to be able to do Deuteronomy 17. This now takes us into chapter 18. It's the same thing. Okay, so we're going to go to chapter 18. We're going to look at verse 18 and 19. Okay, it says, truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall have been bound in the heavens, and whatever, it's the same wording, isn't it? And then it goes, and again I say to you that if two or of you agree on earth concerning any matter that they ask. Okay, you're agreeing on what they ask. So who is the you agreeing on what they ask? The decision-making body. Goes back to Deuteronomy 17, okay? For those of you who don't know what's in Deuteronomy 17, we'll go there in a minute. Remember, this is, listen now, it illustrates exactly Deuteronomy 17, because look what's happening in chapter 18 of Matthew. There's a strife between members of the assembly. What is Deuteronomy 17 about? When a matter arises that you don't know how to handle and you don't know what to do, you go and bring it to the leadership. So you have in Deuteronomy 18, it says, if your brother Matthew 18, if your brother sins against you, go and reprove him between you and him. If he hears you, that's great. You've gained your brother. But if he doesn't, take one or two more, that by the mouth of two or three witnesses, every word might be established. Because when you hear the words, two or three witnesses, we're now talking about a judgment or judicial structure. Because everything in the law, as the Torah gives about judgment, requires two or three witnesses. So now we're talking about the rendering of judgment. In the beginning it was just, hey, I've got an issue with you. I'm going to talk to you and we can work it out. If we can't work it out, now we're going to need witnesses. Now the witnesses are not to fix, step two, the witnesses aren't fixing anything. They're there in case it has to go further. Let's remember this now. The witnesses in step two. Step one, you go to your brother. Step two, that didn't work, you bring witnesses. Now, witnesses are people to witness. They're not there to get involved. They're not there to take sides. They're not there, because some of you will bring your best friend and all the people you think that are going to help you make your argument to your brother. No, you're going to bring people that will be established in front of the assembly if it's necessary to go that far, that people will say they have enough character that if they say that's what they heard, they can be believed. So you're looking for people of reputation, neutral to the situation, to witness that you spoke to your brother and what your brother spoke back. So those witnesses are only necessary witnesses if it doesn't have the effect. Now you may bring the witnesses and the person realizes, wow, I've got witnesses watching now, I better actually work this out. However, if it needs to escalate, it says, and if he refuses to hear you, because he could hear you when you bring the witnesses, say it in front of the assembly. And not just like in front of the whole congregation, but bring it to the leadership structure, Deuteronomy 17. He says, now, and let him be to you like a Gentile or a tax collector. Because at that point, he should have settled it before it got that far. But now notice, it's in that context, he says, and if he refuses, you're going to render judgment. Truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth in a judgment situation, you don't get to just have two or three gather together and decide anything and Yahweh has to do it. That is pure Christianese garbage. Okay? I'm sorry, did I say that out loud? Okay? And they use that all the time. Well, there's two or three, so whenever the three or four of them or two or three of them will get together, all of a sudden they think they're going to accomplish a whole bunch of stuff. Whatever we do, we can bind and loose and all this stuff. No, binding and loosing is a leadership structure authority. And it was given to the leadership. And now let's go take that now to Deuteronomy 17 for a second, just to read that. Because a lot of you know what it says there, but a lot of you don't. Okay? Deuteronomy 17 is going to start in verse 8. Okay? And actually, let's go to verse 6, because it talks about the two or three witnesses. So it says in verse 6, at the mouth of two or three witnesses shall he that is to die be put to death. He is not to be put to death by the mouth of one witness. So you see that there are certain key phrases in the Brit Hadashah, in the apostolic writings, that should trigger you to go to the reference point in the Tanakh where they're referring back to, where they're getting it from. Key phrases that let you know what the issue is. Okay? All right. So, here we have the issue that it says, there's 2 or 3 witnesses, and he says, now, verse 8, when any matter arises which is too hard for you to judge, between blood and blood, plea and plea, stroke and stroke, matters of strife within your gates. It sounds like Matthew 18 is a matter of strife. And it was too hard to get the settlement, so you have to get somebody higher to make a decision. Then you shall rise up and go to the place where Yahweh your Elohim chooses, the assembly's leadership, and shall come to the priest, the Levites, and to the judge who is in those days, and shall inquire, and they shall declare to you the word of right ruling. Notice it says you're going to the leadership in those days. It might be the priests, it might be the Levites, it might be the judge, whatever the leadership structure is at that time. You will go to that leadership structure, and they shall declare to you the word of right ruling. And you shall do according to the word which they declare to you from that place which Yahweh chooses. In other words, it's not just a bunch of people gathered together randomly in a cafe or at somebody's house or at the park or in work or whatever. Okay? It's not just, it's a specific organized judgment structure. And one of the bigger structures would be the Sanhedrin. But actually, you could just be going before the king. You see this with Shlomo, with Solomon. You see this with David. You see it with Moses, actually. And Moses' father-in-law says, you need help because you're trying to decide all this stuff and it's too much. People came to him for judgments of Torah. How do we apply Torah in this situation? What's the right decision? Okay? So this is talking about being done in the place where Yahweh has chosen. And you shall guard to do according to all that they instruct you. Do according to the Torah in which they teach you, according to the right ruling which they say to you. You do not turn to the right or to the left from the word which they declare to you. Now this is important. And the man who acts arrogantly as to not listen to the leadership, to the priest who stands to serve before Yahweh, whoever that person is that is standing there before Yahweh to serve Yahweh, your Elohim, or to the judge, that man shall die. You shall purge the evil from your midst. And let all the people hear and fear and no longer act or do arrogantly. Some of you have come to leadership and you've gotten instruction and you've been arrogant. You need to repent of that. So Matthew 18 and Matthew 16 are both talking about Deuteronomy 17. Are we good with that, Dale? Did I answer the question? Okay? And so you have to start that, and that, by the way, that's why you get teachers to come up to make sure to help you connect those dots together. And there are key phrases that make that easier. Did you want to say something about this? Come right up and get to the mic. If we're talking about something, just so you guys, and you feel like you want to say something, just come right up and we'll get you in on the mic before we get to the next question. Okay, Mike?
Is all of this what is called a Bet Din?
Yes, Bet Din would be a house of judgment. Okay? The Bet Din is the house of judgment. So you'd have a Bet Din that could help decide things. So some congregations have formed what they call a Bet Din, or a Beit Din. Okay? So that they can bring these things before that organization to make decisions. All right. And your question, or comment, I mean.
I have a question. Does this also pertain to like a personal situation if you have a brother who is not walking right, involved in things that shouldn't, like an actual brother?
It only applies to the brother up to step 1 and step 2, meaning you could go to him yourself, even though he's not. This is for those in the group, in the congregation, those who are covenanted, because authority can only do what with those who have chosen to submit to that authority. Okay? So you could go to your brother, and if your brother doesn't want to hear you, you could bring others to try to be witnesses to the fact that you tried to hear them. And bring people that they would respect, who could say, are you hearing what your sister is saying here? But as far as having an authority to make your brother do something, that only comes from them being submitted under an authority.
Was there protocol for the situation I spoke to you about? No.
There's really not. You can talk to him, or you could bring people that he might respect to talk to him, and that's as far as you can go. Okay? Because nothing else, the rest of it is about leveraging what you can do to him, and you can only do if he's submitted under. Okay? And if he's not submitted under, if it's in a community, what you could do is you could throw them out. That's all you could do is, because I've had people come to me and say, well, so-and-so is doing blah, 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 blah. Why can't anybody make them stop? And I'm like, because they're not under my authority. What do you want me to do? I can only do, look, if you're a parent and your child is doing something with some other child and they're doing something dumb or wrong or whatever, there's only so much you can say to the other child that's not yours. Because they're not your child. They're not under your authority. Now, if, for example, I've got a situation with certain people where my children and their children are so close and for so many years that the children from both families know that either set of parents have authority. But that's an established understanding. Okay? This happens in a real harsh way and is really challenging with mixed families, where a family comes together with children that already exist, and those children refuse to recognize the new other parent as any authority. The new spouse of their mother, the new spouse of their father. Well, you're not my father. Well, you're not my mother. That's true. But in this house, I have authority. Okay, but that authority only really works if a person is submitted under it. Which means that just like with the assembly, often the only thing that you can do in a parenting situation is, there's the door. Okay, if you're not going to recognize the authority here, there's the door. Because in this house, there has to be authority. And that's kind of what's going on here. It has to be purged out of Israel, is what they say. Now, of course, we're not going to kill anybody. Because for that, we would have to be in the land and have the whole literal structure there. What we can do is stop it from happening within the body by making it leave or making it stop. And that's what we can do today. All right, does that answer the question for everybody? It's a good question. But churchianity has turned this into, hey, as long as three of us together, we could do almost anything. No. It is not talking about individual people making decisions. It is talking about an appointed structure making decisions. And that's why hopefully you can see it links right back to Deuteronomy 17. And catch the flow. It's right out of the Matthew 18. If your brother sins against you, then it goes into where two or three are gathered together. The binding and loosing. It's about judgment. When there's a situation and it's brought to the leadership of the assembly, they're being told, and when it comes to you, what you bind will be bound. Which also means be really careful what you do. Because you're now owning that decision. Okay? And by bound, it doesn't mean that heaven is forced to do it. It means it has been written and sealed that you made that decision and you're responsible for it. How's that for a little bit different understanding about that? You've bound yourself to the decision. You're not obligating heaven to do anything. Is that different? Thank you, Ruach. I didn't really think of that till just now. Okay? It says here, whatever you bind on earth shall having been bound in the heavens. In other words, it will be bound in the heavens knowing that it is written and sealed that Rabbi Steve on this date just made this decision and blah, 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 blah. So be careful the decisions you make because that's going to get written down and bound. We can't obligate him to do anything. And with that, so if we took it and interpreted it any other way, that's what we would be doing. Okay? Does anybody really think you can make him do anything? I mean, I like the laughter because that's how silly it is. But we do dumb things that we act really like we think that he has to do stuff. He doesn't have to do anything. He only does and is obligated to things he's obligated himself to. He says, if you, then I will. And guess what? He has obligated himself to all the I wills if you do. If you do the if, he will do the then. That's the only thing he's obligated. He's only obligated to what he has said he's obligated to. You can't obligate him to something. And so I think maybe when he's talking about here about binding and loosing, just remember, once you make these decisions, you're locked in. That was yours. You own it. So be careful what you decide. Okay, next question.
It was just a comment, actually. Going back to the judges and, the witnesses, were those the people who sat at the gates of the cities? I know Abraham, when he did his, when he bought the land from the sons of Heth, he did it in front of the gates of the city. Boaz claimed Naomi, or not Naomi, but Ruth, in the front of the city. So, and then there's that song that sister talks about the elders with the staffs in their hands. Are they the ones who are going to be the judges, and will it be like that in the new kingdom?
Well, generally speaking, the elders, those that are no longer doing the physical labor, those that are respected in their reputations and authority, would gather around the gates. That's where the things were generally happening, as people were coming and going. And it was also a central location where everybody could know to find them. You can go to the gates. And so, yes, that would be likely where they would be. And it would be that a lot of them would be involved in judgment. It also would be probably wise in general to pick some of them as your two witnesses to come and hear what's going on, so they have a reputation. But just remember that most of you think bringing 2 to 3 against your brother is against your brother, not to witness what was happening with your brother. It doesn't say gather 2 to 3 witnesses against. Because you'll bring your friends and people that are going to help you make the same case and have more scripture references or whatever it is to back you up with you. That's just ganging up. That's all that is. Go find 2 people, especially think about people that your brother would respect. And let those witnesses know that you are here to be quiet observers. We're not looking to involve you. Now, if you want a mediator, then bring a mediator. That's different. You could bring a brother or a sister to try to mediate. But if you're looking for this process of Matthew 18, you're simply looking for someone who can validate, this is what, okay, let's say the problem was between Kirk and Manny. Kirk and Manny are having an issue, and I get to get brought there as one of the witnesses. I'm there just to say, this is what Kirk said, and this is what Manny said. I witnessed what they said. So that when each one claims what happened, I can say, yes, that's what happened. And there'd be at least 2 or 3 of us so that they can make sure that we agree about what we saw. Okay? Independently validating, this is what each one said. Because let's say the issue was, Kirk went to Manny, so Kirk is trying to say something to him, and he said, but Manny didn't receive it. Okay, fine. So he brings witnesses to say, well, just so you know, because he could claim, well, Kirk never said that. Well, now we have witnesses. Well, yes, he did. But Kirk also can't claim he said something he didn't say, because now there's witnesses of what he did. Because either one of them could be wrong, or both, okay? So just because you're going to your brother doesn't make you the one that's right in that situation. And the witnesses are there because the one who went to his brother could claim he did something that the other one says, well, actually, he never did it. And the person saying he didn't do it could be right. The witnesses are there to say, this is what we saw. And they're not to be doing the judging. They're not to be doing any other of the judicial stuff of it. They're just simply to say, this is what we saw. This is what we heard. Okay? To validate the event. Okay, next.
Okay, we got these 2 and then the live stream.
Okay.
That binding and loosing that you were talking about, in that context of the Christian viewpoint, almost sounds like incantations and spell casting.
It does to some degree. Yeah. Well, it's the idea of somehow he becomes your personal Messiah, and that he now has to, like a genie, you rub the bottle and he does whatever you want, And I always keep telling you, I almost would think we should have a t-shirt saying, he's not your personal anything, you're his. We need to figure that out. Okay, there's no verse that says you need to accept him as your personal Messiah. That's Christianese 101.
Yeah.
Okay? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I would like to go back to chapter 14.
Okay.
And in verse 13, this really spoke to me about Yeshua's humanity.
Yep.
As he heard the news from Yochanan. And now when Yeshua heard it, he withdrew from there by boat to a deserted place by himself. This really speaks to me about, this is an excellent example of Messiah going from concept to context. And also when he was moved by compassion when he saw all the sick. I just thought that was a really good example of Yeshua realizing what it meant to be human, feeling that pain of a lost one and having that compassion.
Amen. Amen. So you see him doing two things. First, he goes off to deal with his grief. They were related. They had a relationship. Not just the relationship Yeshua has with everybody, but they were related. And so, he had to deal with that grief. But then notice that he came out of that grief by coming out and having compassion on others and seeing that they had needs. He didn't just implode, but he did what he needed to do for a brief period of time, and then he came out and he went right back about focusing his attention on others. And so when you're dealing with your grief, one of the best ways to deal with it is to find opportunity to realize others have needs too. Not that you're being selfish, it just helps draw you out of it. Okay? It helps draw you out of it. It helps bring good feeling back. Because when we help people, we feel great. It restores some of that, joy to a place of desolation and pain and grief and sadness. So it's wonderful to be able to then give and see that you can bless someone else, and you receive a blessing when you bless. So that's really good. Thank you for pointing that out, Adrian. Okay, next.
Yeah, I'd also like to look in 14 at verse 29. And he said, "Come." And when Kepha had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Yeshua.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'm ready to walk on the water, but there's two parts in this that really speak to me. And it just marries up with what you were saying about what Yeshua does, is he says to us, "Come." I like Isaiah 1:18 where Yahweh says, "Come, let's reason together." So the invitation is there. The dilemma for me is the hard part of walking it out. In other words, getting out of the boat is up to me. So there's a request and an action.
Amen. Thank you. Okay, if you allow me, I'm going to add to that a little bit, okay? Because that's actually that's the first notes that I put in my notes today was from 14:24 to 32. So we're going to take what he said, which is correct, and we're going to build on that. Yeshua said, "Come." Well, first of all, it started before that. Kepha said, "Well, then, tell me to come." Go ahead. He wanted what Yeshua had. He saw, Yeshua's there. So let's just kind of deal with that from verse 24. It says, "But the boat was now in the middle of the sea, and the agitated by waves, for the wind was against it. And in the fourth watch of the night, Yeshua went to them walking on the sea. And when the tall ones saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, 'It is a phantom.' And from fear they cried." So this is where they're now operating out of fear. "And immediately Yeshua spoke to them, saying, 'Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid.' And Kepha said to him, 'Master, if it's you,'" so step one is we get in our moment saying, "If it is you, take care of this thing, command me to do." Because in your lives, you go through storms and you go, "If this is you, command me to go forward. Command me to be able to walk in this storm." Now, so he says, "Come." It's no big deal. You want to come? Come. And Kepha goes. Now, let's kind of get the big part of this. The storm winds don't slow down. Kepha is walking on the water. In your life, you do ask. He gives you, or you receive, and he says, "Okay, great. That's what you want, come." And then you start walking, and you don't recognize but the storm, but yet you're walking on water. But you're only focused on the storm. In other words, you're handling something way beyond you thought you could have. You're dealing with something outside of your comfort. Things are happening miraculously around you, but yet you're still in the storm. It hasn't fixed yet. But you're not drowning in it. You're standing on the water. Take the full picture here. It doesn't calm down until Yeshua is in the boat. Remember I said, you're the boat. So in the storm, Yeshua's outside the boat. In this metaphor, in this picture. And he says, "Well, come to me." Okay? This is the same thing in the verses say, draw near to God and he'll draw near to you. So sometimes we got to remember the first step is we have to draw near to him. He says, come. So then we have to take the steps in that direction. If we do, we could literally be walking on water. In our situation, whatever would be the metaphor of walking on water in the challenge you're in the whatever the storm is. And you don't even realize you're doing it because you could be drowning. But instead, you're not. And instead of really getting excited about, look at me, I'm walking on water, you're focused on, wow, the wind is still blowing. Because it says here, but when he saw that the wind was strong, it doesn't say he freaked out, he's walking on water. It didn't say that he looked at the water. See, a lot of times the picture shows him, he looks at the water and realizes he's on water, and then all of a sudden he doubts. No, the wind, the storm, the noise in your life distracts you from the fact that you're walking on the water. Okay? And and then he started sinking. He said, Master, save me. And she was probably laughing, going, oh my goodness. I said, come, you came, you're walking on the water. Can you just stay focused? So that's what it's about. Like the little kid. And then you have to reach down. Okay, come here, I'll pick you up. You're fine. Anybody have their kid in the water or in the pool or something? And they're fine, but they're freaking out. You're like, you're fine, you're fine. You reach over, you grab them. Or they panic because they're somewhere on a table or on something, whatever. Or they climb into the tree and they don't know how to get back down. You're okay. Here, come here. You're fine. I can see Yeshua kind of having that attitude at that point. Peter, you're fine. But because you're not a little kid, I'm going to say, he says, you have little faith. He says, you got distracted by your fears and your doubts. Immediately, so Yeshua says, come, he says all that stuff, and immediately he stretches out his hand, he picks a hold of Peter, and he says, oh, you have little belief. Why did you doubt? Now, what was he doubting? The visions you see when people put this into like film and cartoons and images and movies is the idea that somehow he doubted he could walk on the water. No, he doubted that he was safe. He was distracted by the wind. He took his eyes off Yeshua. But usually people picture him looking down. No, he should have been looking left and right and up. The wind is blowing him. And so he says, now notice what happens after that. He says, and when Yeshua came into the boat, then the wind ceased. Now Yeshua could have ceased the wind first and told Peter to come out. So recognize that in your life, the calm isn't going to come just because you asked. It's not going to come even when you're already walking on the water. You're going to have to walk it all the way through and let him complete the situation, make the completed work that he's doing right at that moment. Let him come into it fully, into you, into the boat, and then it'll calm down. But if you're still focusing on and distracted by all that wind and noise and everything around you, you're not allowing him to fully come into you in that situation. Does it make sense? It's just clearing that up. Okay, because that was my first note that I put on here. Okay, live stream.
Okay, first question here. In 16:6, is the teaching that the Christian church, is the teaching of the Christian church and some of the teaching of the Talmud, the leaven of the Pharisees?
Okay, so it talks about the leaven of the Pharisees. You go listen to the teaching on Get Out the Leaven, which is 3 parts from last year, but I will talk about this a little bit. I did mark that down in my notes here. Let's see, where did I put that? 16:6. So this whole section here, Yeshua says to them, mind and beware the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Now, it's again context. So what was just going on before that? They're asking for signs. Their approach is wrong. Their teachings are wrong. It's actually in a chapter in one of the other Gospels. He says, beware the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees, which is hypocrisy. So it's not the Talmud that is the leaven. It's not the Christianity teachings per se that are just the leaven. It's the hypocrisy of having teachings being taught as if they're the teachings of Yahweh when they're the traditions of men. Okay? Or the taking of Torah and twisting it. Okay? So it's the hypocritical part. Trying to convince you something's right when it's not right. So if I came up to you and showed you this phone and tried to convince you it was a banana, Well, you're smart enough to recognize the difference. But what if I took something that looked very similar to a banana and told you it was a banana? But it looks like a banana, but it's not. Okay, I can show you an etrog and tell you it's a lemon, but it's not. But it kind of looks like a lemon, but it's not a lemon. Okay? And we start to drift more and more when we take each thing and it's close but not, and it all turns into hypocrisy. Okay? Because what was happening is here he says, look, he starts with the Pharisees and Sadducees came to him asking for a sign. And he said when it was in the evening you say it's fair weather for the heaven is red. In the morning you say stormy weather today because for the heaven is red and overcast. You know how to discern the face of the heavens, but you're unable to discern the times, the signs of the times. Wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign. I'm only going to give you the one of Jonah. And his taught ones came to the other side and forgot the bread. See, part of the also problem with the Pharisees and Sadducees is that they don't seem to want to accept the realities. They forgot the bread and then they panicked. The problem wasn't forgetting the bread. They forgot what happened the last time. It's like forgetting when they were taken out of Egypt. It's like forgetting when they were delivered out of this trial and that trial. And there were thousands of them throughout the Tanakh before you get to Matthew. And they forget. And so here they are. They said the teachings of the Pharisees and Sadducees, which they seem to forget where their source is and where they need to be turning. And so it's not the teachings, meaning the Talmud versus the actual, that kind of teachings. It's the stuff peripheral to that. Teaching that, you can trust in this or trust in that, or how you approach things or looking for a sign. These are all those things that are teachings. Like all the people that got obsessed about blood moons. That would be a Sadducee Pharisee teaching. They got everybody all riled up about something that was a non-event. By the way, I hope you're all comfortable in year 2 of the post-apocalypse. Because after all, the blood moons meant that, and we're 2 years past it. They were wrong. And that's a good part of what's going on in here. And so now by the way, notice that there's a difference between here where it says they. Okay, they kind of discern. How is it that you do not understand that I do not speak concerning bread, but beware the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees? And then they came to the understanding that it was the teachings. Yeshua makes it more clear in another place where he says it's the hypocrisy. So it's what parts of the teachings have hypocrisy in it. That's the problem. Not just the teachings in general. Not necessarily Talmud or Christian version of Talmud, because the Christians have their own, traditions of men. Let's call Talmud traditions of men. But it's the hypocrisy that comes through those things. Not just those things just because they're those things. Because some of them are good. Okay? Even Christianity had some things that were good. But what we need to understand is the hypocrisy is the problem. So go listen to the teaching, Get Out the Leaven, the 3 parts from last year, and that will hopefully clear that up. Okay. Adrian? I'll repeat it. It's okay. Okay. Okay, so he said that he's heard in Christianity where a lot of people will teach that the leaven was the law. This is Yeshua teaching against the law. Because now bear in mind that it's the disciples that come to the conclusion. Then they understood that he did not say beware the leaven of bread, but the teaching of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. But the teaching came out of them looking for a sign. That was the problem. It wasn't the teaching of Torah instruction that was the problem. We lack context. As a matter of fact, every battle between him and the Pharisees was them trying to catch him breaking Torah. Not that they were breaking it, but that they wanted to catch him breaking it. And so that was not the problem. As a matter of fact, that's what he talks about. When they sit in Moses' seat, you do what they say. In other words, when they're reading to you from the law and they're teaching and instructing you from the law, you do what they say. Now, the peripheral stuff that they're doing, don't do that stuff because they say but they do not do. So this is important as we kind of understand this. Okay. Back to the live stream.
All right, 19:9. Is it okay for a woman to divorce or put away a man? The one perspective.
Okay, I think I addressed it on the teaching on marriage, divorce, and putting away. But yes, it's not a problem for a woman to divorce a man. Putting away is something that only men did, and we don't do it today. It's a public shaming. It's separate from what a divorce is. And if you are not understanding a word I just said, you got to listen to the teaching, understand the Hebrew and the Greek, and understand what is really going on in these chapters when it talks about marriage and divorce. Okay, it's just very important that we get that. Let me see where I wrote that in my notes, because I know I did. Let's see. Okay, 19, let's go to 19. This is an important piece of this for those. This is not what the lady was asking on the line, but let me just say this is an important piece. In 1906, and by the way, I thank my brother James, who was visiting from Ireland. He kind of really emphasized this in a conversation I had with him. Bear in mind what it's talking about here. When it talks about the putting away and the divorce, he says, verse 6, so that they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what Elohim has joined, let no man separate. Just because you married somebody doesn't mean Elohim joined it. Light bulbs going on everywhere. You joined it. Can we all understand and admit there's an awful lot of things that we do in our life that has nothing to do with him, and he had no connection to it. We made those decisions. We joined ourselves and did things and whatever we did. Okay? That it was us and not him. So we're talking about the rules really going further when it has to do with whether or not Elohim joined it. Okay, so the question would be then, what does that look like? I figured that's why your hand was up. Okay. Let's talk about the fact that, first of all, if you are married, he allowed or caused. I'm not saying he joined, but he certainly allowed you to do it. Or he could have caused you to do it for lessons to be learned. Now, if he allowed you to do it, it could be not because it was something he wanted you to be in. There's a lot of very terrible abusive marriages. He allowed it because he has to allow terrible things to happen so man realizes that when we are put to our own devices, we do terrible things. And also that we have to learn that we're not really capable of making really good decisions often. And then, especially when I talk to people who've been in multiple abusive relationships, and you think, how did you make that mistake more than once? Because we're not trained to do that correctly. So I'm not picking on the person as being, what's wrong with you, you dummy, for doing it more than once. It's all you understood how to do. And so you found yourself in that situation more than once. But let's just be careful that we're not thinking about Elohim joining. Now, when you come through a covenanted relationship with another person who is covenanted, and there is structure, and that structure walked you through the premarital process where you get to know each other and make your decisions, then that structure can very much more likely be understood as Elohim joined. Okay? Almost none of you did that because you didn't know better. You didn't have Torah probably when you got married. By the way, doing it that way doesn't mean you'll never have a problem. But it means that you better work harder on it because Elohim has joined that. You have made choices with proper guidance and made those commitments. Okay? So hopefully that makes some sense. If that didn't completely answer your question, you can ask me later and we'll talk more. Okay? It's, this whole marriage divorce thing is very tough. But understand there's a difference between putting away and divorce. Putting away was public shaming. We talked about that in Matthew when we talked about what Joseph was not going to do to his wife when she was found pregnant. So hopefully that covered that a little bit. Okay? Okay, anything else on live stream? Back to live stream? No, yes? Okay. Wait, did you want to talk about that whole marriage thing again? Wait, hold on. We're going to bring you a mic real quick. It's coming on this side. Well, you raised your hand. You could have kept it down. She's looking like she regrets the idea.
I know. But
She's like, well, I didn't want the mic.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Now it went out of my head, but it kind of goes back to the Mary and Joseph thing, the shaming and putting away. How can we reconcile, if it's not quote unquote with Scripture, virgin birth? How would Yah cause Yeshua to go into a tameh, or a non-virgin woman, for Yeshua to be
I didn't
born?
say she was or wasn't. I'm just saying that we
I
have
know.
to understand the word.
Yeah.
Okay? So for those out there going to say, Rabbi's teaching that against the virgin birth, I never said any such thing. Okay? But understand that he was tameh when the woman with the issue of blood touched him. Okay? I mean, he was a human being, and he was in a state of tameh often. But not because of sin, but because of coming into contact with things that would make him unclean. Okay? You would run into unclean things all day long, and unclean people all day long. And so if he were to go to the temple, he would have to do the same rituals as anybody else before going. Okay? Because there's a status that you need to be to go to the temple. You need to be tahor. You need to be clean. And so he would run into these things on a very regular basis. And so, yes, he was tameh often, when he would come into contact with things that would make you in a state of tameh. And because you're not tameh because you do something wrong necessarily. Women were tameh every month. Not because they did anything wrong, just because that's their cycle. Made them unclean once a month. Okay? Okay, that's the question. Okay, so how does the Ruach enter into a woman who's tameh? Okay, well, first of all of us are human beings. We're all substandard. Okay, we're not Elohim. Okay, so this Ruach which impregnated Yeshua into Miriam, well, how does the Ruach dwell in you? So what's the difference? Right, okay, but the virginity has nothing to do with it from that point of view, okay? Okay, I mean, the Ruach comes into us when we're tameh. We're not talking about the full presence of Yah like over the mercy seat that has different rules of engagement. The Ruach has been in men since the beginning of time. And the Ruach can dwell in us no matter what state we're in. That's how it pulls us out of the foolishness that we're in. The Ruach has to be there to poke us, disturb our peace, and all those things. Amen? Okay? I know you're struggling with this, but I can't fix your thing for everybody at the same time. We'll have to talk about that privately. Okay? Let that be a lesson for everybody. Sometimes my answer is going to take a long time for either me to get the right words or for you to process, and that's fine, but we can't do that in the group setting. Okay? It's just not going to be possible to do that. Okay. But I accept the fact that this is something you're struggling with, and we can talk about it, and we'll try to get there. All right? Anybody else in the live stream? You guys are done? Oh, different topics. Bring it over there. We have very few minutes, but go ahead.
All right, from Nick Goddard on 17:24 through 27. He's aware of the tax, but does not understand verse 27. And also he had a follow-up. Does the fish in 17:27 relate to Jonah?
Okay, I don't think the fish necessarily relates to Jonah, but what he's talking about, the tax. Look, I don't know enough about what was going on in those times. What I do know is that people were starting to deal with issues like between not only the vertical relationship of Torah, but what do we do also in the secular relationship with the government we're under. And so this tax thing came up. And that's why you have places where Yeshua says things like, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. And so this tax thing became an issue. He says, fine, it's an issue, go get a fish, you'll pay the tax. So he had to do it in this sort of spectacular way. All right? Because he wanted to show, look, I really don't, this is not something that would really be an issue, but fine, if it's going to make you feel better, go get a fish, get the coin, pay the tax. Anything beyond that, I would be totally beyond, I would be guessing upon guessing. Okay, next question.
From Lance Williams, we were talking about the 15:21 through 39, the woman from Canaan referring to herself as a dog, and Yeshua, you answered some of those questions, but the last one was, is there a correlation to the story about feeding of the crowd with 7 large baskets left over? This is maybe the idea of bread or word being plenty for everyone.
There's probably, and I'm not going to get into it now, there's probably the significance of the fishes and the loaves and the numbers is a gematria play for those that understand gematria, the numbers and what they're actually saying, and the way the numbers represent Hebrew letters, and so what we see going on there. Don't have the time for that right now. But that's the more likely reason why he tells us how many fish and how many loaves, and then how many baskets. It's all about numbers and how the numbers are significant to those that would understand what that's pointing to. And essentially what it's pointing to is things like pointing out that he was dealing with Israel. Okay? But go ahead, next question.
From Dolores Stone, she says, please explain 14:16. How were they supposed to feed them?
Well, when he said, give them to eat yourselves, he wasn't saying, well, like, just sit them down and feed them. He says, sit them down, and I'm going to have you feed them. And then he goes and gets the fish and the loaves, and he goes and gives it to them. But, of course, it's just like with you in your life. He'll tell you to do things, and you're like, well, how am I supposed to do that? He says, well, just go get ready and do it, and he'll provide. I think that's the big metaphor there.
Okay, from Nate Taylor, can the Ruach in us be parallel to our conscience?
Look, I think the voices that are in you compete to have you believe it's your conscience, okay? But it's just, so just let's keep it back to just those three basic voices, Hasatan's, yours, and the Ruach, and just try to seek to listen to the right one. Okay, anybody else? Because we only have a minute or two here. Okay, you guys are good? Okay, let me just see if there's anything else on my list here. I think we covered actually pretty much everything on my list. That's good. Okay, let me just see. There's a couple of things here. Do I need to mention it real quick? Okay, I think it was very interesting to notice something in 20 and verse 8. The story about the workers and getting paid. I want you to notice in verse 8 that when evening came, the master of the vineyard said to his manager, call the workers and pay them their wages. And notice that if he had paid them the first to the last, people would have just taken their wages and gone home and never would have known. Because generally you're not going to sit around to figure out and watch and see what everybody else is getting paid. You get paid, you leave. But the guys waiting to get paid are watching. Now, the guys who were waiting to get paid later, they wouldn't have any problem with the first guys got. Then by the time they got, they probably were very excited because they got paid the same. But you see that the parable shows that he purposely does it in a way that's going to test and see what's going on inside. So that's really, I thought that was really cool to notice the order of the sequence there. Let's see. And I guess I just need to pay at least a few seconds of attention to when they come to him asking what to do to receive eternal life. The question is, what do I need to do? And he told them what to do, because doing is what reward comes from. Salvation is not a reward, it's a free gift. Eternal life is a reward. It comes from effort. Now, without salvation, the effort would be of no point. So the salvation free gift makes the effort valuable. But just remember that when they come to him asking things like, why? He says, good teacher, what good shall I do to have everlasting life? That's 19:16. He says, well, guard the commands. If you wish to enter into life, guard the commands. Well, which ones? And he starts listing them. Doesn't list them all. Now, it could be he said a lot more and the writer didn't put them there. He just said what he said. He says, well, all these I've done. And he says that if you wish to have integrity and be perfect, go and sell what you have. In other words, he knew the man was obsessed with his possessions. They were idols to him. That's why he has to get to the bottom where he says, those who have left mother and father, sister and brother, lands and fortunes and jobs. And, because some of you have said to yourselves and had a discussion, this is not an effort to try to get you all to move to Cleveland, Tennessee. Well, yes, it is. I'm kidding. But some of you struggle because of what you're going to have to leave behind. If you're really being drawn to be in community, whatever it is, And it might mean that there's a community closer to you, but just there's no one where you are, and you can move there. But are you so afraid to leave something behind? We're still afraid of the emotional pain. But yet he says, if you're willing to go through, don't you think people that left their houses, brothers, sisters, fathers, mothers, and children, and lands have emotional pain? But if you've done it for my name's sake, for my authority's sake, for the purpose of furthering your growth in his process, he says, those people shall receive. And again, that's not to say that you should leave. You should counsel. Maybe you need to be where you are. But the point is, if it comes out that you should leave and go somewhere, by the way, that also has to do with like your jobs. Sometimes you'll realize you need to leave your job because your job is either is unethical, not Torah-based in terms of the way they treat people, or you have to deal with Shabbat or holy day issues. Are you willing to have the emotional pain of having to find a new job? Because some of you are comfortable in your place, which is funny because if we talk to you, you might tell me how much you hate your job. And then you get all upset, though, when it's being threatened to be taken away from you. It's like you've been wanting and praying for a new job, and now Abba gave you an opportunity, now you're panicking. Go out on the water and receive the miracle of walking and stop paying attention to the storm. Amen? I think that's all I'm going to cover. Okay? We can talk more after. I mean, look, and some of you are relatively new. You're going to have lots of questions, and we can, there'll be no end to the questions, and that's good. It's good that you're asking. We'll try to get those answers out there. All right, so it's just about 20 after, which is good. Let's go ahead and have somebody close us in prayer. Okay, where's the mic? Kurt, you do it. I like to get Kurt with the where's the mic question, but he seemed ready for it this time, so go ahead.
I had the hot potato. Yeah. Father Abba, Elohim of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, we thank you for blessing us with your word, and we pray that as we move forward in the book of Matthew here, that we're able to glean your wisdom for us and apply it to our daily walk. Please watch over us as we move forward, and all this in the name of your Son, Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Awesome. Thank you, Kurt. Okay. Good job, everyone.